Pregnant, blind, and alone, she's left at the mercy of a wild horse. But what happens when the instinct for the impossible awakens? The sun rose slowly over the hills of Warm Springs, painting the sky with orange hues that reflected in the thermal waters of the region. At Rose Hill Ranch, the day started early. The first rays of light already found Rose up and about, her 22 years accompanied by a determination that impressed everyone. Her wavy brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, while her skilled hands prepared hay for the horses. "Good morning, my flower." Martha's warm, raspy voice echoed through the small room they shared in the most remote part of the ranch. "Good. Morning, Grandma, you're up early today." "At my age, sleep becomes a luxury," replied the old woman, adjusting her colorful shawl over her shoulders. "Are you heading to the stable now?" Rose nodded, picking up her worn leather bag. "Lightning has been restless since yesterday. I need to see how he's doing this morning." Martha furrowed her brow, concerned. That black horse with his unpredictable temperament always gave her chills, but her granddaughter had an inexplicable gift with animals, especially with that one. "Be careful, child. That animal has the devil in him." Rose smiled, kissing her grandmother's forehead. "Lightning is just misunderstood, Grandma. Like many people out there." The path to the stable was her favorite moment of the day. Dew still covered the tall grass, and the smell of damp earth filled her lungs. In the distance, she could see the imposing main house of Rose Hill Ranch, with its white walls and blue windows. There resided the Stone family, owners of everything as far as the eye could see, including, in a way, her own destiny. As she approached the stable, Rose felt a knot in her stomach upon seeing Richard Stone coming out of the building. Tall, athletic, with a smile that hid more arrogance than friendliness, he was the main heir to the ranch. His intense green eyes always made her uncomfortable. "We need to talk," he said dryly, looking around to make sure they were alone. "We have nothing to talk about, Richard. Don't be foolish. I know you've been spreading rumors." Rose felt her blood boil. 3 months ago she had discovered she was pregnant, and since then Richard had been avoiding her, as if she were carrying a contagious disease. "I haven't spread anything. Unlike you, I have dignity." Richard's face hardened. "Listen carefully. Rose, you're nobody. Just another employee who takes care of horses. If you think you're going to get money from my family with this story—" "I don't want your money," she interrupted, her eyes welling up. "I just want you to take responsibility." "Responsibility," he laughed scornfully. "Prove the child is mine." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Colin, Richard's younger brother. Unlike his older brother, Colin had gentle brown eyes and a sincere smile that lit up his face. He was carrying some books and seemed surprised to see the two together. "Good morning," he said, with a tone that showed curiosity about this morning encounter. Richard quickly moved away, giving Rose one last threatening look before addressing his brother. "I was just checking on Lightning's condition. Dad wants to use him in next week's parade." "But Lightning isn't fully tamed yet," Colin commented, concerned. "Rose is the only one who can approach him without risk." "We'll see about that," Richard replied coldly, walking toward the main house. When they were alone, an awkward silence hung between Rose and Colin. There was something in the air, an unspoken feeling that both preferred to ignore. "Are you okay?" Colin finally asked, noticing the pallor on the young woman's face. "I am," she answered, forcing a smile. "Just worried about Lightning. Your brother seems determined to use him in the parade, and that could be dangerous." Colin nodded, watching her carefully. "You care too much about others, Rose, including those who don't deserve it." Before she could respond, Lightning's loud, powerful neigh echoed through the stable like a harbinger that this day would mark the beginning of great changes in everyone's life at Rose Hill Ranch. The tension at Rose Hill Ranch grew each day. Behind carefully maintained appearances, the winds of truth began to blow, threatening to topple castles of lies built over decades. That afternoon, while adjusting a horse's reins in the stable, Rose felt a strong dizziness that forced her to lean against the wall. It was becoming increasingly difficult to hide her pregnancy, especially from Thomas, the foreman, who watched her with attentive eyes. "You don't look well, girl," he commented, approaching with a glass of water. "This is the third time I've seen you like this week." Rose accepted the water, avoiding the gaze of the man who, at 50, was almost a father to her. "It's just fatigue, Thomas. I didn't sleep well." The foreman sighed, sitting on a nearby hay bale. "I've known you since you were little, Rose. I took care of you when your mother left this world. I know when you're lying." His words touched deep in the young woman's heart. Helen, her mother, had passed away when Rose was only 5 years old. The memories were few, but all of them filled with love and the scent of jasmine that always accompanied her. "I'm pregnant," she finally confessed, in an almost inaudible whisper. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of those words. "It's his, isn't it? Richard's." Confirmation came in the form of silent tears streaming down Rose's delicate face. It wasn't just the pregnancy that frightened her, but the uncertain future that awaited her and the child. "He doesn't want to know, Thomas. He says there's no way to prove it's his." The foreman stood up, a hard expression taking over his sun-wrinkled face. "That boy has always been rotten inside. Just like—" He suddenly stopped as if he had said too much. "Just like who?" Rose asked, curious. "Doesn't matter now," Thomas deflected. "What matters is taking care of you and this baby." On the other side of the ranch, in the impressive library of the main house, Albert Stone contemplated an old portrait with an indescribable expression. The photograph showed a young woman of striking beauty, with wavy hair very similar to Rose's. "Still keeping that picture, Dad?" Colin's voice surprised him. The patriarch quickly put the photo in a drawer, but not quickly enough to escape his youngest son's attention. "She was just an old acquaintance," he answered dryly. Colin didn't insist, but his curious gaze remained. There was much that went unsaid in that house, and he was beginning to feel that these silences were somehow connected. "Richard wants to use lightning in next week's parade," he commented, changing the subject. "I think it's risky. That horse only obeys Rose." Albert stiffened at the mention of the young woman's name. "Your brother knows what he's doing, and as for that girl," he hesitated, "she's just an employee. Don't get too involved in the lives of the staff, Colin." The warning tone didn't go unnoticed. In town, Lauren, the mayor's daughter and Richard's close friend, was having coffee while waiting for him. Elegant and calculating, her blue eyes hid ambitions that went far beyond what she appeared. "We need to resolve this problem," said Richard upon arriving, sitting down abruptly. "Rose is pregnant." Lauren showed no surprise, just a cold smile formed on her perfect lips. "And why would that be my problem?" "Because we're engaged, Lauren. Or have you already forgotten our agreement?" The agreement he referred to was purely one of interests. Lauren would inherit important lands for the expansion of Warm Springs, and Richard, as her future husband, would have direct access to the region's political power. "I haven't forgotten, but I also didn't expect you to be so careless," she responded, dryly. "What do you plan to do?" Richard took a sip of coffee, thoughtful. "Convince my father that she's an opportunist. I've already planted some doubts about her character. Then it's just a matter of waiting for her to understand there's no place for her at Rose Hill." Lauren observed the busy street of the small town, where everyone knew each other, and rumors ran as fast as water. "Your father seems to have a strange affection for this girl. He just values her work with the horses. Nothing more," Richard replied quickly, although a flash of doubt crossed his eyes. That night, Rose decided to visit her mother's grave in the small town cemetery. She brought wildflowers and sat beside the modest headstone. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she murmured, caressing the cold stone. "Sometimes I feel like this ranch holds secrets that could destroy me or save me." The moon partially illuminated the cemetery when Rose realized she wasn't alone. Among the shadows, a figure approached slowly. "Sorry if I startled you," Colin's gentle voice sounded in the darkness. "I also came to bring flowers." To Rose's surprise, he placed a small bouquet of jasmine on Helen's grave. How did you know they were her favorites?" Rose asked, confused. Colin didn't answer immediately, his eyes fixed on the headstone, as if trying to decipher an enigma. The encounter at the cemetery had left Rose restless. Why would Colin bring Jasmine to her mother's grave? What connection could he have with Helen? Questions without answers filled her mind as she walked through the ranch fields the following morning. A dense fog covered the landscape, giving a ghostly air to the stables. Rose worked with a brush in hand, preparing Lightning for training. The silence was broken only by the occasional neighing of horses and the distant sound of the thermal waters that made the region famous. "You seem distant today," commented Martha, who had come to bring lunch to her granddaughter. "Your eyes look different." Rose blinked several times, feeling a slight burning sensation. Must be the smoke from yesterday's burn. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. For days, Rose had been noticing changes in her vision. First, there were small spots that appeared and disappeared, then an exaggerated sensitivity to light. Now it was as if a mist formed before her eyes, especially at the edges of her vision. "You should go to the doctor," insisted her grandmother, placing her wrinkled hand on the young woman's forehead. "It's not normal for these symptoms to last. So long." Rose nodded without enthusiasm. The truth was that she was afraid of what the doctor might discover. Her pregnancy was already too heavy a burden. She didn't want more worries. In the main house, Albert was receiving a visit from Mayor Gregory, Lauren's father. The two men were discussing the expansion of a resort near the ranch lands. "It's a unique opportunity, Albert," argued the mayor. "With our children's marriage, we can join forces and transform Warm Springs into the tourism capital of the state." Albert observed the map spread out on the table, thoughtful. "I don't know if Richard is ready to take on that responsibility." "Come. Now he's 28. It's high time he became a businessman. Besides, Lauren will keep him in line. My daughter has a firm hand." The stone patriarch didn't respond immediately. His thoughts wandered to a distant past, where hasty decisions changed the course of many lives. The conversation was interrupted by Colin's arrival, who brought some documents. "Sorry to interrupt, Dad. I just came to bring the contracts you asked for." Seeing the mayor, Colin greeted him with a formality that hid his discomfort. He didn't like the way Gregory conducted local politics, always favoring the wealthy at the expense of the workers. "Your brother isn't here?" asked the mayor. "He left early with Lauren. They went to town." The mayor smiled, satisfied. "These are young people. I can't wait to make this engagement official. The party will be memorable." Meanwhile, in town, Richard and Lauren weren't exactly discussing engagement preparations. In fact, they were at Dr. Roberts' clinic, a doctor known for his discretion. "I need to be sure she's really pregnant," explained Richard, tense. "And if that's the case, I want a solution." The doctor adjusted his glasses, visibly uncomfortable. "Richard, if you're talking about what I think you are, that's illegal and unethical." Lauren intervened, her mellifluous voice hiding the coldness of her intentions. "Doctor, we're not asking for anything illegal. Just a consultation to verify the truthfulness of this pregnancy. Rose might be lying to extort the Stone family." "Doctor." Robert knew this story well. Helen, Rose's mother, had been his patient in the past, and now her daughter seemed to be repeating the same tragic destiny. "I'll examine the girl if she comes voluntarily. Don't ask me for more than that." Back at the ranch, Rose was continuing her routine in the stable when a stronger dizziness made her stagger. This time she not only felt her balance fail, but her vision completely darkened for a few seconds. "Rose!" Thomas's worried voice sounded distant. "Hold on to me." When her vision returned, it was blurry, with dark spots that seemed to dance before her eyes. Panic began to take hold of her. "I can't see properly, Thomas. What's happening to me?" The foreman helped her sit on a hay bale. His face hardened with concern. "I'm taking you to the doctor right now." "No," she protested. "If anyone finds out, they'll fire me. I can't lose this job, not now." The desperation in Rose's voice was palpable. Thomas hesitated, torn between respect for her decision and fear of what might happen. "At least see Mrs. Judith. That healer knows herbs that might help." Rose nodded, resigned. Mrs. Judith was known in the region for her ancestral knowledge of medicinal plants and alternative cures. Some called her a witch, others a saint. For Rose, she was just a wise woman who lived in harmony with nature. The afternoon was already falling when Rose arrived at Mrs. Judith's small house, hidden among leafy trees at the edge of the ranch. The elderly woman received her as if she had been expecting her. "I saw you coming in the cowrie shells last night," she said without preamble. "The spirits are agitated around you, child." With gentle but firm hands, the healer examined Rose's eyes, murmuring incomprehensible words. Then she prepared a bitter tea from herbs that grew in her yard. "What's happening to me?" Rose asked after drinking the liquid with difficulty. Mrs. Judith sat down, her eyes fixed on some invisible point. "It's not illness, it's a warning. Your eyes are closing to the outer world because they need to open to deeper truths. Truths that have been hidden for a long time on that ranch." The healer's enigmatic words sent chills down Rose's spine. "What truths?" "About who you really are, child. About your mother, Helen, and the forbidden love that marked her life. About the true reason for your connection with lightning." Night had fallen over Rose Hill Ranch when Rose returned from Mrs. Judith's house. Her heart was heavy with incomplete revelations and enigmas that seemed to confuse rather than clarify. The healer had spoken about her mother and a forbidden love, about truths hidden in the shadows of the ranch, but nothing that could really help her understand what was happening. "Where have you been?" asked Martha, concerned upon seeing her. Granddaughter entered with slow steps into the small house they shared. "Your face is as pale as wax." "I went to see Mrs. Judith about my eyes," Rose answered, sitting down carefully. "She gave me tea, but—" The young woman didn't complete the sentence. How could she explain to her grandmother that, according to the healer, her vision was deteriorating not because of illness, but as a spiritual warning? How could she tell her that, amid passes and prayers, Mrs. Judith had mentioned that Helen, her mother, kept secrets that could change everything? "But what, child? Speak up." "But I think what I really need is a real doctor," she concluded, opting for the safer path. The next morning, while the sun was still timidly rising on the horizon, Rose headed to the stable as usual. Her vision remained blurry, with dark spots that appeared and disappeared, but she had learned to disguise her condition so as not to worry the other workers. Upon entering the stable, she noticed something different. A strange smell, almost imperceptible, hung in the air. Lightning, normally calm in her presence, was agitated, stamping his hooves against the packed earth floor. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, approaching carefully. At that moment, her eyes caught a quick movement near the back door. Someone had just rushed out. Rose tried to identify who it was, but her vision failed. All she could make out was a female silhouette. She didn't have much time to think about it. A few minutes later, she noticed thin smoke coming from one of the corners of the stable near the hay storage. Her heart raced when she understood what was happening. "Fire!" she shouted, running to try to put out the first flames that were beginning to spread rapidly. With all possible agility, she opened Lightning's stall and those of the other horses, encouraging them to leave. The black animal hesitated, as if not wanting to leave her behind. "Go, Lightning," she ordered, giving a light pat on the horse's back. The smoke was becoming denser every second, making her already compromised vision even more difficult. Rose coughed, feeling her lungs burn as she tried to find the exit. The fire had spread with frightening speed, blocking the main door. Disoriented by the smoke and panic, she stumbled over something on the ground. It was a small glass bottle with remnants of a clear liquid. The smell of alcohol was unmistakable. This fire was not accidental. Before she could reflect on this, she heard shouts from outside. It was Thomas and other workers arriving to fight the fire. The foreman managed to open a passage through the flames and entered, wrapped in a wet blanket. "Rose, where are you?" "Here," she answered with difficulty, her voice weakened by smoke inhalation. Thomas found her kneeling, holding the small bottle. With a quick movement, he picked her up in his arms and ran outside the burning stable, moments before part of the roof collapsed. Outside, chaos had ensued. Workers ran with buckets of water, trying to control the flames. The frightened animals neighed and ran through the field, and on the porch of the main house, the Stone family observed the scene with varied expressions, Albert with genuine concern, Richard with an impassive countenance, and Colin. Colin was running toward the stable, desperation stamped on his face. "Rose!" he shouted upon seeing her in Thomas's arms. "Are you okay?" The foreman laid her on the grass, away from the intense heat. Rose coughed incessantly, her eyes red and tearful. "I can't see clearly," she murmured, terrified. "Everything is dark. We need to take her to the hospital," Colin determined, already preparing to carry her to his car. "No!" Richard's authoritative voice cut through the air. He approached with firm steps, accompanied by Lauren, who had just arrived at the ranch. "Dad already called Dr. Robert. He'll be here in minutes. There's no need for scandal." Thomas stood up, facing Richard with a hard look. "Scandal? A young woman almost lost her life here." "And thank God she's fine," replied Richard, with a calmness bordering on cynicism. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check the damages and organize the reconstruction." As he walked away, Thomas bent down and picked up something that was shining on the grass. It was a golden earring in the shape of a half-moon. He quickly looked at Lauren, who instinctively brought her hand to her ear, then discreetly put the object in his pocket. Dr. Robert arrived in a few minutes as promised. After a preliminary examination, he determined that Rose needed to be moved to his clinic in town. "She inhaled a lot of smoke," he explained, "and there's something wrong with her eyes that I need to investigate further." It was Colin who took her, against Richard's veiled protests. During the journey, Rose alternated between moments of lucidity and confusion. "It was deliberate," she said at one point, her voice a thread. "Someone set fire to the stable on purpose." Colin gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. "Are you sure?" "I found a bottle, smell of alcohol, and I saw someone leaving through the back," she answered, each word costing an immense effort. "A woman—" Colin's gaze hardened. A suspicion was growing in his mind, but he dared not verbalize it yet. At the clinic, after more detailed examinations, the diagnosis was alarming. The toxic smoke had caused severe damage to Rose's retina, accelerating a degenerative process that, for some unknown reason, was already underway. "I'm sorry," said Dr. Robert with genuine sadness, "but you're losing your vision, and there's not much we can do to reverse the process." The news fell like lightning on Rose, pregnant and now with the prospect of going blind. The future, once uncertain, now seemed completely bleak. 2 weeks had passed since the fire in the stable. Rose Hill Ranch was trying to resume its routine, but an air of apprehension hung over everyone. The stable was being rebuilt, and the animals were temporarily relocated to improvised structures. Rose, now with significantly compromised vision, insisted on continuing to work. She could only see shapes and patches of light, depending on the brightness of the environment. Dr. Robert had been clear. Her blindness was advancing rapidly and would be permanent. "You shouldn't be here," said Thomas, finding her near Lightning's improvised stall. "You need to rest." "Rest for what?" "To stay at home thinking about what will happen when I can no longer see anything," she replied bitterly, while her hands caressed the black horse's mane. The animal seemed calmer than ever under her touch, as if understanding the fragility of her condition. The connection between the two had always been special, but now it seemed even deeper. "Have you discovered anything about the fire?" she asked in a low voice. Thomas looked around, making sure they were alone. "I found this near where the fire started," he said, placing the golden earring in her hand. "Do you recognize it?" Rose ran her fingers over the object, feeling its shape. "A half-moon-shaped earring," she murmured. "It's Lauren's, isn't it?" Thomas nodded, even knowing she couldn't see him clearly. "I think so. She was here that day, arrived shortly before the fire started." "But why would Lauren do this?" Rose questioned, confused. "Because she knows about you and Richard," a male voice interrupted the conversation. It was Colin, approaching with cautious steps. His face showed a mixture of concern and determination. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he continued, "but I heard about the earring and need to tell you something." Thomas and Rose remained silent, waiting. The night before the fire, I heard Richard and Lauren talking in my father's office. They were discussing about you, Rose, about how to solve the problem. Rose's heart raced. So Richard had really gone that far? Had he encouraged Lauren to set fire to the stable, knowing she would be there? This is serious, Colin. Thomas spoke, his voice laden with indignation. We're talking about an attempt at... He didn't complete the sentence, but everyone understood what went unsaid. The heavy silence that followed was broken by Rose. We don't have proof, she finally said. An earring means nothing. It could have been lost at another time. You're always defending others, even when they try to harm you, Colin commented, with a mixture of admiration and frustration. In the main house, Albert Stone was searching through old documents in his office. The door was locked, and a restlessness consumed him. The fire had awakened memories and fears he thought were buried. Among the papers, he found a yellowed envelope. Inside, a letter written in delicate calligraphy and a faded photo. In the image, a young Helen smiled beside a newborn black foal. Lightning, murmured Albert, running his fingers over the photo. You were always the link. Reading the letter was interrupted by firm knocks on the door. It was Richard. Dad, we need to talk about Rose, he said, entering without waiting for permission. This story has gone far enough. Albert quickly put the documents in the drawer. What story, son? This girl can't continue working here. She's blind, for God's sake. It's a risk to her and to the animals. The patriarch observed his son with a penetrating look. Since when do you care about Rose's well-being? Richard looked away, uncomfortable with the direct question. It's not a matter of caring. It's a matter of responsibility. The ranch is not a charity institution. The ranch is mine, Albert answered dryly, and I decide who works on it. Rose stays as long as she wants. End of discussion. The unusual firmness in his father's voice left Richard disconcerted. He wasn't used to having his opinions ignored, especially in matters related to the ranch's administration. Meanwhile, in the small town of Warm Springs, Martha was visiting the local church. She lit a candle before the image of the Virgin Mary and knelt down, murmuring a prayer for her granddaughter. That's when she felt a presence beside her. She's suffering a lot, isn't she? Asked Lauren, feigning compassion. I heard about the fire and the loss of vision. Such a tragedy. The old woman turned, surprised. She had never had much contact with the mayor's daughter, known for her disdain for the simpler residents of the region. God doesn't give us a burden heavier than we can carry, she responded diplomatically. Lauren smiled, a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. Sometimes I wonder if God isn't punishing certain sins, she commented with false casualness. Like an employee who gets involved with her boss and then gets pregnant to try to extort him. The shock on Martha's face was visible. She didn't know about Rose's pregnancy or her involvement with Richard. The young woman had kept the secret even from her grandmother. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, feeling the blood drain from her face. Lauren stood up, satisfied with the effect of her words. Oh, so she didn't tell you. What a shame. Well, now you know. Your little granddaughter is expecting Richard Stone's child. Or at least that's what she says. With these words, the young woman left the church, leaving behind a stunned Martha and the echo of a plan that was beginning to take shape. Back at the ranch, Colin had convinced Rose to accompany him to the main house. He guided her carefully by the arm, leading her through paths she once traversed with such ease. Why did you bring me here? She asked, feeling vulnerable in the Stone family's territory. Because I found something that might explain a lot, he replied, leading her to the library. Her diary of my father's, and in it your mother's name appears several times. Rose's heart raced. Mrs. Judith's enigmatic words returned to her mind. Hidden truths, forbidden loves, invisible bonds. The Stone family library was a sanctuary of dark wood and antique books. The aroma of aged paper and leather mixed with the soft perfume of fresh flowers that always adorned the central table. For Rose, now almost completely blind, the environment manifested itself through her other senses. The characteristic smell, the texture of the wood under her fingers, and the almost reverential silence that dominated the space. Colin guided her to a comfortable armchair and carefully closed the door. He made sure they were really alone before speaking. "I found this by chance," he said, placing a small, leather-bound book in her hands. It was hidden behind a row of encyclopedias, as if someone had tried to conceal it. Rose ran her fingers over the worn cover, feeling the initials AS embossed in relief. "Albert Stone," she murmured. "It's your father's diary." "Yes, and I believe it contains answers that both of us are looking for," replied Colin, sitting beside her. "Do you mind if I read some parts to you?" She nodded, a knot forming in her throat. Instinctively, she brought her hand to her belly, which was beginning to show the first signs of pregnancy. Colin opened the diary to a marked page and began to read in a low voice. April 10th, 1996. I saw Helen again today. She was taking care of the horses as she always does, with that dedication that makes it impossible to look away. Margaret noticed my interest and made a point of mentioning her presence during dinner. The jealousy in her eyes was evident. How can I explain to her that I can't control what I feel? Helen is like a ray of sunshine amid the storm that my marriage has become. Rose felt a shiver run down her spine. Helen, her mother, had worked at the ranch many years before, but she had never imagined that she might have had some kind of involvement with the Stone patriarch. "Continue," she asked with a trembling voice. Colin turned a few pages and proceeded. July 15th, 1996. Helen is pregnant. The news fell like a bomb on me. Margaret suspects, but has no proof. I offered money, a house in town, anything so that Helen and the baby would have comfort. She refused everything, saying she wants nothing more than the right to raise her child in peace. Her dignity disarms me and makes me fall even more in love. The silence that followed was deafening. Rose felt the world spin around her, even in the darkness of her compromised vision. The dates, the facts, everything was beginning to make a terrible and wonderful sense at the same time. "I was born in March 1997, she whispered. "I know," Colin replied softly. I checked. The tremor in his voice betrayed the impact of that discovery for him as well. Rose didn't need to see to feel the tension emanating from his body. "There's more," he continued, turning a few more pages. "Listen to this. March 2nd, 1997. Helen. Gave birth to a girl. Rose, she called her. A name so simple and yet so significant. Margaret is furious. Her suspicions were confirmed when she saw the baby with her own eyes, the same green eyes that characterized the Stone family. She demanded that I distance myself, threatened to take the children away. How can I choose between my sons and my newborn daughter? God forgive me. But I had to lie. I denied paternity publicly. The price of the lie was to see Helen leave with Rose in her arms, swearing never to return. Tears were now freely flowing down Rose's face. Her entire life had been built on a lie. Her father wasn't an unknown man who had abandoned her mother, as she had always believed. It was Albert Stone, the man she saw from a distance, respected and feared. So this means that, she couldn't complete the thought, that we're half-siblings, Colin concluded, with a mixture of pain and relief in his voice. Me, you, and Richard. The realization hit Rose with full force. Richard, the father of her child, was actually her half-brother. The nausea she felt had no relation to the pregnancy, but to the horror of that revelation. "Does he know?" she asked, referring to Richard. "I'm not sure, but there are indications that my father may have told him recently." That would explain the sudden change in Richard's behavior, the abrupt distancing after discovering the pregnancy. It wasn't just cowardice or contempt. It was also fear of the scandal that an incestuous relationship would cause. "There's one more part you need to hear," said Colin, leafing through the diary until he found one of the last entries. "This explains your connection with lightning. June 12th, 2000. Helen passed away today. The news came as a brutal blow. Cancer, they said, fast and merciless. My heart is in pieces. Now I'm left with little Rose, living with her maternal grandmother. How can I care for her without revealing the truth? I decided that the black foal, son of thunder, will be my link to her. The animal was born on the same day as Rose and Helen. Always said there was a special connection between them. I will raise him here on the ranch, and when Rose is older, I will find a way to bring her closer to him, closer to me." Rose covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a sob. Lightning wasn't just a horse she had an affinity with. He was a carefully planned bond by Albert, a way to keep her connected to the ranch, to his legacy, to his blood. The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted them. Someone was approaching the library. Colin quickly put the diary in a desk drawer and helped Rose dry her tears. The door opened, revealing the imposing figure of Albert Stone. Seeing Rose sitting in the armchair, his eyes widened in surprise and then in understanding. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice more controlled than his face revealed. "We were just talking, Dad," replied Colin, keeping calm. "Rose is adapting to the loss of her vision, and I thought a quiet environment like the library would be comfortable for her." Albert studied his son for a few seconds, then looked at Rose. Even with her compromised vision, she could feel the weight of that gaze. "Leave us alone, Colin," ordered the patriarch. "Dad, I don't think—" "Please," Albert interrupted him, with a tone that admitted no contestation. Reluctantly, Colin gently squeezed Rose's shoulder before leaving, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was dense, laden with decades of untold secrets. Rose felt the sofa sink slightly when Albert sat down beside her. "You know, don't you?" he finally asked, his voice broken by contained emotion. "Yes," she answered simply. Albert sighed deeply. "I never had the courage to tell you, first out of cowardice, then out of fear of losing you again. When Martha brought you to work with the horses, I saw it as a second chance, an opportunity to have you nearby to see you grow, even if from a distance." "Why didn't you say anything when Richard started to get close to me?" Rose asked, the pain evident in her voice. "Why did you allow that to happen?" The old rancher lowered his head. "I didn't know. When I found out, it was already too late." The sun was setting slowly over Rose Hill Ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that Rose could only imagine. In the last 2 weeks, since the revelation about her true paternity, her vision had deteriorated completely. Now she lived in a world of vague shadows and absolute darkness, depending on her other senses to navigate reality. The conversation with Albert had been painful, but strangely liberating. Years of silence gave way to a raw honesty that, although late, brought some consolation. The patriarch of the Stone family finally recognized Rose as his daughter, promising to ensure her future and that of the child she carried in her womb. However, not everyone received the news well. Richard, upon confirming his suspicions about his relationship with Rose, entered a state of violent denial. The shame and horror for the incestuous relationship they had, albeit without prior knowledge, consumed him from within. Guilt quickly transformed into anger, and anger into a blind desire to erase any and all traces of that mistake. That afternoon, while Rose rested in the small room she now occupied in the main house, a concession from Albert that had caused great commotion among the employees, Richard secretly met with Lauren at the property's boundaries. "This can't continue," he was saying, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "My father has lost his mind, bringing that. Your sister," Lauren completed, with a venomous smile. "Why don't you say the word, Richard? Is it so difficult to admit that you slept with your own half-sister?" His face contorted into an expression of pure hatred. "Shut up. Nobody can know about this. Can you imagine the scandal? I could lose everything, Lauren, the ranch, the inheritance, the respect of the town." Lauren was observing her perfectly painted nails, displaying a calculated disinterest. "And what do you intend to do?" "She needs to disappear," he replied, lowering his voice. "Not physically, understand me well, but she needs to leave here. Go far away, where nobody knows her." "And how do you plan to convince her of this?" A dangerous gleam passed through Richard's eyes. "I won't. You will." He approached, holding Lauren's arm firmly. "Tomorrow afternoon, while my father is in town resolving the paperwork for the new will, you will invite Rose for a therapeutic walk, a stroll to get some fresh air, to help her adapt to blindness. She's so desperate for acceptance that she'll agree." "And then?" Lauren asked, fascinated by the plan that was taking shape. Take her to the back trail, near the solitary oak, tie her to the tree, and leave the rest to me." "Are you going to hurt her?" There was a slight tremor in Lauren's voice. One thing was to provoke jealousy or even cause an accidental fire. Another, quite different, was to participate in something more serious. "Don't be an idiot," Richard retorted. "I'm just going to scare her enough to accept a generous offer to leave. A convincing accident that shows everyone, including herself, that a blind woman has no place on a ranch." The plan was set. The next morning, while Albert headed to town accompanied by Colin to resolve legal issues related to Rose's inclusion, in the will, Lauren appeared at the ranch with a bouquet of flowers and her best fake smile. "I came for a friendly visit," she announced to Martha, who received her with suspicion. "I heard the news and wanted to congratulate Rose personally. After all, it's not every day you discover you're a stone, is it?" The irony in her voice was evident, but her posture left no room for refusals. Rose, who was in her room, heard the conversation and decided to face the situation. "It's all right, Grandma," she said, leaning on the cane that now accompanied her. "I can receive Lauren." The meeting was initially tense. Lauren observed with morbid fascination Rose's now opaque eyes, which before shone with an intense green like all the stones. "It must be difficult," she commented, feigning compassion. "Not being able to see the world around you, the colors, the faces, your own child when it's born." Rose remained impassive, but the mention of the baby touched an open wound. "What do you want, Lauren? We're not friends and never were. You don't need to pretend now." The frankness momentarily disarmed the visitor. "I came to propose something that might help you," she replied, regaining her composure. "A walk, fresh air, light exercise. Doctors say it's important for pregnant." "How women to stay active, did you know?" "A walk? With me?" Rose didn't hide her suspicion. "You need to learn to adapt to your new state." Lauren carefully chose her words. "And I need to redeem myself for the past. Let's call it a first step toward peace." Against all her instincts, and ignoring Martha's apprehensive look, Rose accepted. Part of her wanted to believe that people could change, that the revelation of her true identity could build bridges where before there were only chasms. Thomas, who was observing the scene from afar, felt a tightness in his chest, something about. That sudden visit didn't seem right. He decided to stay alert. Later, when the sun began its descent on the horizon, Lauren returned to pick up Rose. She wore light clothes and brought water and a small snack, as if they really planned just an innocent walk. "I know a quiet trail at the back of the property," she explained, guiding Rose by the arm with false gentleness. "There's an old oak there that they say is magical. People tie ribbons to it and make wishes." "I know that place," Rose commented. "I used to go there as a child with my mother." The mention of Helen made Lauren squeeze Rose's arm a little tighter. "Your mother, she must have been quite a woman to win over Albert Stone." The venom in her voice was unmistakable now. "Don't talk about her like that," Rose warned, stopping in the middle of the path. "If you came to provoke, we can go back right now." Sorry, Lauren hastened to correct her tone. "I'm just curious. It's such an unusual story." Reluctantly, Rose allowed them to continue the walk. The smell of the earth, the singing of birds, and the gentle breeze on her face were comforting, making her remember a time when the world was full of colors and defined shapes. When they reached the oak, Rose felt the rough texture of the trunk under her fingers. "It's exactly as I remembered," she murmured, emotional. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Lauren acted. With quick and precise movements, she pulled a rope from the bag she was carrying and wrapped it around the trunk, tying Rose to the tree before she could react. "What are you doing?" Rose shouted, trying to free herself. "This isn't funny, Lauren." "It's not meant to be funny," the other replied, giving a final knot to the rope. "It's meant to solve a problem." With horror, Rose understood that she had fallen into a trap. Her hands were tied behind the trunk, and no matter how much she struggled, she couldn't free herself. "Why?" she asked, desperation growing in her voice. "What will you gain from this?" Lauren stepped back a few steps, admiring her work. Peace of mind, a fiancé without distractions, and mainly the guarantee that the stone fortune won't be divided with a blind bastard and her child. The sound of hooves approaching made Rose freeze. She knew that rhythm, that strength. It was lightning. But how? The animal was in the stable, miles away. "What did you do?" she asked, fear giving way to understanding. "Did you release lightning?" "Not me," Lauren replied, already moving away. "Richard, he thinks an accident will convince you to accept a deal and disappear. I, personally, think there are more permanent solutions, but I didn't want to get my hands dirty." With these words, Lauren disappeared among the trees, leaving Rose tied up and at the mercy of the fate they had planned for her. The sound of hooves was getting closer and closer. Rose, tied to the oak, felt her heart beating erratically. Richard's plan was cruel in its simplicity. Lightning, known for his wild temperament, would be the perfect instrument for a convincing accident. Who would question if a blind woman was injured by an untamed horse in an isolated area of the ranch? "Lightning," she called, her voice trembling with fear and hope. "It's me, boy. It's me." The powerful neigh of the animal echoed through the clearing. Rose couldn't see him, but her other senses, now more acute due to blindness, captured every movement. The characteristic smell, the strong breathing, the heat emanating from his gigantic body. She felt when the horse approached, his muscles tense under the shiny black coat. For an interminable moment nothing happened. Then, to her surprise, she felt the soft muzzle of the animal gently touching her face, as if he recognized her, as if he wanted to say, "I'm here." "You recognize me, don't you?" she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "We've always been connected, from the beginning." Albert's diary had revealed the truth. Lightning was born on the same day as Rose. Helen, her mother, always spoke about a special bond between her daughter and the black colt, a bond that transcended rational explanations, that now manifested in an almost miraculous way. With surprising gentleness for such a powerful animal, Lightning began to bite the ropes that tied Rose to the tree. His strong teeth worked with precision, as if he understood exactly what needed to be done. "That's it, boy, that's right," she encouraged him, feeling the ropes loosen. When she finally freed herself, Rose hugged the horse's neck, burying her face in his mane. At that moment, an ancestral connection was confirmed. It wasn't just the fact that they were born on the same day. It was something deeper, almost spiritual. "We need to go back," she said, more to herself than to the animal. "But how?" As if understanding her doubt, Lightning lowered himself, bending his front legs in a clear invitation. Rose hesitated, for only a second before accepting. Carefully she felt the animal's body and climbed onto his back, holding firmly to his mane. "Take me home, Lightning," she asked, leaning on the horse's neck. "Show everyone who you really are." The animal neighed and departed in a controlled gallop, as if measuring each step to not drop his precious cargo. On the way back to the ranch, fate was preparing other decisive encounters. Thomas, who had followed his instinct and gone out to look for Rose after seeing her leave with Lauren, found Colin and Albert returning from town. The foreman quickly reported his suspicions. "Lauren took Rose for a walk, but something doesn't seem right to me," he explained. "I saw Richard releasing Lightning earlier, away from the stables. He seemed determined." Albert's face paled. The stone patriarch knew well the calculating temperament of his eldest son, and now that he had officially recognized Rose as his daughter and legitimate heir, he feared what Richard might be capable of doing. "Where did they go?" asked Colin, already running to his car. "The trail of the old oak," replied Thomas. "I saw them heading in that direction." The three men departed immediately. On the way, they found Lauren returning alone, walking calmly as if nothing had happened. "Where is Rose?" Colin asked, jumping out of the car and firmly holding Lauren by the arm. The young woman tried to maintain her composure, but fear was beginning to show in her blue eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." She wanted to stay a bit longer. Appreciating nature, "I needed to get back." "Liar!" Thomas intervened, approaching threateningly. "I saw what you were planning, you and Richard. What did you do to Rose?" Albert, maintaining the calm that only years could provide, placed himself between the foreman and Lauren. "Tell the truth, girl. What did you do to my daughter?" The word daughter pronounced so firmly by Albert broke something in Lauren. The reality of the situation finally hit her. She was involved in a plan that could have serious consequences. It was Richard's idea, she confessed, trembling. He wanted to scare her, make her accept money to leave. We tied her to the oak and released lightning, but the horse was just supposed to scare her, not... She didn't need to complete the sentence. The three men were already running toward the trail, leaving Lauren behind with her belated remorse. Before they reached the oak, however, an extraordinary vision made them stop. Coming from the opposite direction, majestic even in the twilight, the figure of Rose mounted on Lightning emerged among the trees. The black horse advanced in an elegant and sure trot, carrying his precious cargo as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "My God," murmured Albert, his eyes welling up. "It's a miracle," added Thomas, taking off his hat in a sign of respect. Colin ran to meet them, helping Rose dismount from the horse. Her eyes, although blind, conveyed a serenity that contrasted with the drama of the situation. "He saved me," she said simply, caressing Lightning's neck. "He always knew who I was." Back at the ranch, the inevitable confrontation happened. Richard was waiting on the porch, his anxiety poorly disguised on his face upon seeing the group returning, Rose intact, mounted on the horse that should have injured her. "How?" he stammered, instinctively backing away. Lightning recognized. "Me," replied Rose, being guided by Colin until she was face to face with her half-brother, just as he recognizes the truth, even when we try to hide it. Albert then took control of the situation. With the authority that characterized him, he confronted his eldest son. "You plan to hurt your own sister, your own blood, to protect what? Your inheritance? Your pride?" "She's not my sister," Richard finally exploded. "She's a usurper. An opportunist who got pregnant on purpose to—" "For what, Richard?" interrupted Rose, her voice laden with a dignity that silenced everyone. "I didn't know we were siblings when we got involved. Neither did you. It was a terrible mistake, but it wasn't intentional. The child I carry is innocent in all of this." A heavy silence fell over the group. Martha, who was observing the scene from the kitchen door, slowly approached her granddaughter, enveloping her in a protective hug. "The truth is now exposed, as it should have been a long time ago," declared the old woman, addressing Albert. "Helen always wanted to tell Rose about her father. It was I who insisted that the secret be kept. I thought I would protect her from rejection, from shame. I was wrong." Albert nodded, understanding. So many mistakes made out of fear, so many lives affected by silences that seemed to protect, but only postponed inevitable pain. "What happens now?" asked Colin, verbalizing the thought that lingered in everyone's mind. It was Rose who answered, with surprising determination. "Now we start over, with the truth on the table, as painful as it may be." In the weeks that followed, profound transformations occurred at Rose Hill Ranch. Richard, unable to deal with the shame and contained scandal, departed for abroad, temporarily renouncing his part in the inheritance. Lauren, exposed for her involvement in the plan, saw her engagement broken and her reputation tarnished in town. Albert, finally free from the weight of decades of secrets, officially recognized Rose as his daughter, guaranteeing her not only financial security, but the right to raise her child on the ranch that, ironically, had always been her true home. Colin, discovering himself in love with his half-sister, even before knowing of their kinship, transformed this love into a genuine fraternal dedication, becoming Rose's right-hand man in the administration of the part of the ranch that Albert had entrusted to her, the stables and the breeding of racehorses. As for Lightning, the black horse gained an almost legendary status in the region. The story of the animal that had saved his blind owner spread, attracting curious visitors and increasing the prestige of horses bred at Rose Hill Ranch. On a spring afternoon, 6 months after the dramatic events at the Oak, Rose sat on the porch of the main house, cradling her newborn son in her arms. She couldn't see his little face, but her other senses captured every detail: the sweet smell of his skin, the warmth of his little body, the sound of his peaceful breathing. Colin approached, sitting beside her. "He has your eyes," he commented, smiling. "Green as emeralds, the stone eyes." Rose smiled, gently rocking the baby. "It's fair. Since I can no longer see with mine, let him see the world for both of us." In the distance, in the field stretching before the house, lightning peacefully grazed. From time to time, he raised his majestic head and looked in the direction of the porch, as if watching over mother and child, as if knowing they were connected by bonds that transcended the visible, the explainable, the common. And so, under the blue sky of Warm Springs, Rose Hill Ranch continued its existence, now free. From the secrets that had haunted it for so long, a new generation was beginning, carrying the legacy of errors and successes of its ancestors, but with the promise of a future built on truths, however difficult they might be to face. Because as Rose had learned in her journey from darkness to light, truth might hurt, might transform, might redesign destinies, but it was the only solid foundation upon which one could build a life worth living.